Welcome to the first lesson of the what and how for Photoshop beginners. So in the first lesson I want to cover what is Photoshop and what type of Photoshop version do you need as a beginner. So I guess most of you already know what Photoshop is, but for those who don't, here's a more technical explanation. Photoshop is an image editing software developed and manufactured by Adobe Systems Inclusive. Photoshop is considered one of the leaders in Photoshop editing software. The software allows users to manipulate, crop, resize, and correct colors on digital photos. The software is particularly popular amongst photographers and graphic designers. So all in all, Photoshop is a photo editing software that we photographers or graphic designers use to enhance, create, manipulate, or create really remarkable images. So let's start talking about what type of Photoshop version do you as a beginner really need. When starting out with Photoshop, first ask yourself these 4 questions. Will I use Photoshop for my business? Will I use Photoshop for my hobby? Will I use Photoshop on a daily basis? And do I really need Photoshop Creative Cloud? Now that you have answered these 4 questions, take a look at the different Photoshop versions and their prices, keeping in mind your position and what type of Photoshop version you really need. Let me brief you on the different Photoshop versions. Photoshop CS4, the 4th version of Photoshop. Not so good to start out with, cheap but hard to come by and very outdated. I wouldn't recommend this version. Photoshop CS5, the 5th version of Photoshop. Okay to start out with, it's cheap but hard to come by and outdated as well. So I wouldn't recommend this unless you already have a version and you're a beginner. Photoshop CS6, the 6th version of Photoshop. Good to start out with, the price lying around 250 US, still available from a few online stores. Research this a little bit on Google to find your local store. Also, I would recommend this if you're a hobbyist or a beginner. Photoshop CC 15 to 16, the latest Photoshop version number 7, coming out with regular updates, and it's also a monthly subscription plan of $19.99 with regular updates. This Photoshop version is a cloud-based system, and you can read up more about this all on the details at adobe.com, or choose a plan at creativeadobe.com with the plans. I would definitely recommend this version if this is for your business and if you use Photoshop on a daily basis. A little side note here, Photoshop is available for all operating systems, meaning Windows operating system and Macintosh. So this is all for the first lesson on Photoshop, what and how. We'll now move over to the second lesson where we'll start discussing the Photoshop layout right away on the desktop.